I was never the kind of person who checked the bank account every day. I trusted my wife. We had an unspoken arrangement. I was responsible for the main income, and Karen handled our expenses and the kids' savings accounts. For 16 years, there was never a reason to doubt, until that morning. I was at the office when an email from the bank came in. The subject line was simple: recent activity, Ivy's college savings account. I clicked it out of habit, not worried, not suspicious, until my eyes landed on the final number, $52.14. I blinked a few times, thought I was misreading. Then I went still. That account was supposed to hold close to $95,000. We had saved since Ivy was still wobbling on her first steps with automatic monthly transfers. Not a single withdrawal in all those years. And now it was nearly empty. No warning, no alerts for large activity, just silence. I called the bank immediately, my voice shaking so much the rep had to ask my name 3 times. She confirmed it. The balance was indeed $52.14. The rest had been withdrawn gradually over the past 6 months. Can I see a transaction history? I tried to stay calm. She sent over a 6-page statement. Each withdrawal just a few $100s, often under $500 to avoid alerts. But in total, almost everything. Transfers were made to an account named K Lane Enterprises, a name I had never heard before. I closed the laptop, heart pounding. My body flushed hot, but my hands were ice cold. By the time I got home, Karen was in the kitchen, blending a smoothie and laughing on the phone with someone. I placed the printed statement down on the marble counter. Firm. What is this? She looked at me, still smiling, though her eyes narrowed like she was trying to figure out which secret had been caught. She hung up. What are you talking about? What are you talking? Ivy's college fund. There's $52 left. You drained it. Where did the money go? Karen frowned, then sighed like she was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. Don't make this a thing. I just borrowed from it temporarily to invest in a new project. A big client's coming next month. I'll put it all back. No. You don't borrow your child's college fund to gamble on an investment. That money is not yours to take. You know that. Daniel. She softened her tone, sweeter now. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd say no. This was a major brand opportunity. All I needed was upfront capital, and the return could be triple. I did it for the family. I gripped the edge of the counter. You created a shell company, withdrew in small amounts over 6 months, funneled the money into anonymous wallets, and you call that for the family. Karen went quiet. That kind of quiet I recognized. Not guilt, calculation. I tried to keep my voice low. Why didn't you tell me? Why take the one thing meant for our daughter's future? Because you wouldn't understand, she snapped, voice rising. You clock in 8 hours a day, clip your paycheck, pay bills, save like a machine. I'm tired of that dull routine, Daniel. I want more. I want control. I don't want to wait for retirement to feel alive. I froze. Not at her words, but at the realization that the woman I once thought was my life partner now saw our family as a cage. After a few heavy seconds, Karen shook her head, picked up her phone, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me there with the bank statement, the corner torn from how tightly I had gripped it. As she climbed the stairs, I turned and saw Nate standing halfway down. He didn't say anything, just looked at me. Calm, steady, older than his 13 years. I forced a smile. I guess you heard all of that. Nate nodded. You don't have to argue with Mom. His voice was low and slow. I've been recording everything. I raised an eyebrow. Recording. He nodded again. Transactions, messages, login devices. She thought I wasn't paying attention. But I started tracking back in February. I was stunned. My eyes locked onto my son's. Gone was the innocence of a typical 13-year-old. In its place was something still and sharp. Nate, what are you saying? He answered gently. I'll show you, but not yet. She's not ready to know she's been watched from the inside. I sat down as if gravity had failed me, my head spinning. A 13-year-old who knew his mother was stealing and quietly built a case. I didn't know what chilled me more, that my wife betrayed us, or that my son had silently been preparing the price she'd have to pay for a long, long time. We met in our second year of college. I studied electrical engineering. She was in communications, a collection of subjects I never quite understood, but Karen adored. She always came to class with a notebook filled with scribbles of event layouts, color palettes, concept ideas for local art shows. Her eyes lit up every time she talked about stage lights, music, the sparkle of everything she called beautiful. I wasn't the charming type. I showed up to class on time, worked weekends at the campus parking lot, and had no particular talent beyond doing math quickly. Yet somehow, she noticed me. Once, Karen told her roommate I had a kind of adorably loyal vibe. I heard it through the half-closed door, and instead of feeling insulted, I just smiled. We fell in love awkwardly and quietly. She was the first to say I love you, and it took me nearly 3 minutes to gather the courage to say it back. After graduation, I got a job as a maintenance engineer at the local energy company. She became an event assistant at a small wedding agency in town. Then came our own wedding. Simple, small, warm. Karen didn't care about designer dresses or imported orchids. She only wanted yellow lights, acoustic music, and a backyard with white flowers climbing over a bean trellis. It was a day I once believed to be the most beautiful of my life. 5 years later, Ivy was born. 4 years after that, Nate. At the time, I thought I was the luckiest man alive. A smart wife, 2 healthy kids, a mortgage we were paying down steadily, and an automatic college savings plan set up each month. But perhaps what I never learned in college was how to hold on to a heart that's changing. After Nate was born, Karen began to feel restless. She started talking about feeling boxed in, that being a full-time mom made her lose herself, that staying home with the kids, going grocery shopping, cooking, reading parenting books, made her feel like she couldn't breathe. At first, I thought it might be postpartum depression and suggested she speak to someone. She scoffed, "I don't need medication, Daniel. I need a life." She began taking freelance gigs for small events around town. Gradually, Karen created a separate Instagram account under a different name. She started posting party photos, handcrafted cocktails, evening gowns. "It's just personal branding," she told me when I asked. "Social media is part of work now. Don't worry." And I did trust her. I wanted to trust her. She still came home on time. She still read to Ivy, still helped Nate with his spelling words. But something started to shift. A $2,500 dress, a spa bill from the upscale town nearby, the one only VIPs knew about. Then a credit card alert. Karen had swiped repeatedly at a luxury bag boutique. That same day, she told me she had attended a creative planning session. I talked to her, gently the first time, firmer the second. By the third, she laughed and shrugged. "I know you think I'm reckless with money, but I'm tired of asking permission for everything. This is also money I earned." But it wasn't. Not really. I was still the sole breadwinner. Her contracts brought in a few $100s a month, nothing that could keep up with the lifestyle that was accelerating. One day I saw a tagged photo of Karen in someone's story. She was at a resort in Florida, midweek, with a group of people I didn't recognize. She told me it was a sponsored career retreat, but the photo was by the pool, a cocktail in hand, backless dress, and the caption said, "Finally freedom." I didn't say anything that day, but something cracked inside me. I started checking our accounts more frequently, changed the main password, and then I saw them. The small recurring transactions every week. Transfers to a company named K Lane Enterprises, a name I had never heard before. When I asked, Karen dodged. She said it was a client company, that it was a big opportunity coming. She would double, triple the money if I just trusted her a little more. But I didn't expect this. I didn't expect that among those strings of transfers was Ivy's college fund, our firstborn, the girl I skipped lunch for months to save up enough to open that account back when she was still in preschool. I used to think betrayal was when someone cheated. I didn't know there was a colder kind, taking money from your child's future just to buy your own version of glitter. Sitting there with the trembling bank statement in hand, I tried to trace back where I had missed the signs. But then I realized, people don't change overnight. Karen didn't become someone else. She slowly revealed what was always there, things I never imagined I'd one day be forced to face. The truth is, some people can love you deeply, and still betray you, when what they want becomes more important than what's right. I had loved Karen, and maybe a part of her had once loved me too. But at some point, freedom became more valuable to her than family. I used to believe I was someone who had control, who planned ahead, who prepared for the worst. I didn't go to bars, didn't gamble, didn't throw money into risky investments. I just worked, paid taxes, saved. I cut down every personal expense just to make sure my kids could go to college without drowning in student loans. I thought that was enough. I thought I had done my part until I discovered a trail of scattered transactions, like needles in a desert, but sharp enough to collapse everything I had built. I sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours, printing out statements from every sub-account Karen had ever touched. Some had a few dozen dollars left. Some had already been closed. But they all led to the same type of destination: anonymous digital wallets, recipient names written in strange combinations of letters and numbers, transfers routed through platforms only people in the crypto investment world would recognize. Some were easier to read: invoices from Cartier, Tiffany and Company, Saks Fifth Avenue. Who did Karen buy a watch for? Who were the bracelets for? Why, while I saved every penny for Ivy's tuition, did she spend nearly $4,000 just to reserve a seat at a rooftop cocktail networking night? I couldn't even name the anger I felt. It didn't rise like fire. It was cold, deep, like someone had slowly cut every tendon inside my chest and let the whole thing collapse without a sound. Ivy found out 2 days later. I couldn't keep it from her anymore. She had just received a letter from her dream college, Yale, saying her file had been shortlisted for a scholarship interview. I remember she ran into my room, screaming and crying in joy, but then she stopped. Noticing I didn't react the way I usually did, I had to tell her every word. I collapsed to the floor. Her face went pale. She stayed quiet for a long moment, then asked just one question. Was it Mom? Did she take everything? I nodded. There was no other answer. She cried. That kind of cry that catches in the throat, makes no sound, but the tears fall in slow, steady lines. I knelt down and held her, felt her whole body trembling like she had been cut off from the world. I felt helpless, felt like a failure, felt unworthy of being a father. That night, I didn't sleep. The next night, I didn't either. I wrote dozens of emails requesting additional scholarships, typed each word like a man drowning, trying to grab whatever faint hope he could, explained the family situation, asked for exception, told them about a parent who had misused family finances. But every reply came back with the same phrases: we regret, funds exhausted, application not eligible due to poor credit rating. I checked my credit. It had collapsed. Karen had taken out a co-signing loan in my name, I still don't know for what, and missed payments. My credit score was now just a negative echo. I didn't know what to do anymore. I didn't even know where to begin. Only one person in the house moved like nothing had happened: Nate. My son didn't ask, didn't comment, didn't offer opinions, but he also wasn't distant. Every morning he still ate breakfast at 7 sharp, put on his school uniform, packed his backpack. Every evening I heard his keyboard tapping from inside his room. At first I thought he was playing games or finishing homework, but something didn't feel right. One night around 1 in the morning, I was passing the hallway, meaning to remind him to turn off the lights. The glow under his door was still blue. I knocked lightly. No answer. I pushed the door open slightly and froze. His laptop screen was glowing, but it wasn't a game. Not Word, not Excel, not any school software. It was financial graphs, cash flow charts, commands extracting data from crypto wallets, an open email window with attached files labeled backup, February transactions, emails between Karen L. and financial contact, second download, proof of service orders from Ivy's education fund, file zip. He didn't know I was there. I didn't dare speak. I stood there like a stranger in my own home, watching my 13-year-old son sit in silence, typing lines of code like a man on a mission, lips pressed, eyes focused, not a flicker of hesitation. I stepped back quietly, gently shut the door like I had never opened it. That whole night I couldn't sleep, not because of Karen this time, because of my son. I started to feel afraid, not of what he was doing, but because maybe, while I was falling apart, he had already begun to stand up. I walked into the room, no knock, no warning, just opened the door and froze. Nate looked up from the screen, not startled, not flustered, just tilted his head slightly as if he had been expecting me. "Do you want to see it now?" he asked, his tone as calm as if he were inviting me to watch a class presentation. I nodded gently. Nate turned the screen toward me. A series of Excel spreadsheets appeared. Not the kind you'd expect from a middle schooler. These were financial tracking sheets, coded expense logs, transaction IDs marked in color, a flowchart of links between anonymous digital wallets. "This is everything I've tracked over the past 4 months," Nate said, his hand moving the cursor smoothly across the tabs. "Starting with the first withdrawal from Ivy's college account, March 4th. He clicked each line. $1,200 to K-Lane Enterprises. $1,375 routed anonymously through Coinbase. $2,340 deposit at a Seminyak resort in Bali. $3,890 in jewelry from Tiffany. Recipient unknown. Delivery address different from ours." I said nothing. I couldn't. Every number hit like a blade slicing through memories of the trust I once had in Karen. And yet, these weren't just numbers. They were undeniable proof. Sorted, analyzed, compiled by a 13-year-old child. "How did you even get all of this?" I asked quietly, eyes still locked on the screen. At first, it was just curiosity. When Mom started dodging questions every time I brought up Ivy's savings. Nate said, his shoulders lifting slightly as if even he hadn't expected it to go this far. "She reused an old password, and she didn't clear her browser history." "You got into her bank account?" I asked. "No." Nate looked at me seriously. "I got into her email, then followed the transaction notifications, wallet links, confirmation codes. There are a lot of ways to gather data without direct access. Everything's right there. Adults just forget to delete." He opened another tab. Cash flow map, a visual diagram of how Karen had moved the money. Arrows branched from our joint accounts, into side wallets, then to intermediary wallets, finally into questionable investment platforms. Another branch went to an anonymous PayPal account, the same email Karen once used to book a flight to Bali. "It's systematic. You see," Nate pointed. "Weekly withdrawals under $500 to avoid detection, using anonymous platforms to send, but not erasing the traces thoroughly. And most of all, never using her own name. She used yours and Ivy's." That last line struck like a punch to the chest. "What?" "She used Ivy's social security number to open an investment wallet, and your name for a support loan. I found the confirmation email from the bank in her inbox. It was in a folder labeled promotion draft." I sat down, not because I was tired, but because if I didn't, I thought I might collapse. "How did you learn all of this?" Nate didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just spoke plainly as if stating a fact. "YouTube, Reddit, a few security forums, some groups for people whose families were victims of financial abuse." I looked at my son and wondered when exactly he had grown up. Wondered where I had been while it happened. "And what are you planning to do with all of this?" Nate opened a folder named Hold for Now. Inside were over 20 files, each one a neatly labeled record. Bank statements, screenshots, extracted emails, data tables, verified receipts. It looked no different from a formal legal dossier. "I haven't sent any of it yet," Nate said. "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" He paused, then turned to face me directly, waiting for her to make one more mistake. I shivered, not from cold, but from the way he said it. Calm, not angry, not bitter, but with a level of clarity that was terrifying. "I don't know how to teach adults morality," Nate said quietly, "but I know how to make them think twice before doing wrong again." I looked into my son's eyes. That gaze did not belong to a child. He didn't cry like Ivy, didn't scream, didn't beg. He chose silence, gathering, observing, assembling each piece like building a fortress. one Karen never knew she was being surrounded in. "Are you angry at her?" I asked, almost foolishly, but I needed to hear it. Nate looked down at his hands, then back at the screen. "I'm angry she thought Ivy and I were too dumb to notice. She chose to trade trust for a cheap version of freedom. And when she did, she didn't just take money. She took away what trust we still had." The room went quiet, only the sound of the laptop fan, blue light spilling softly across my son's face. Eventually I asked, "Do you have a plan?" Nate opened another tab. "A step-by-step proposal, including a drafted email to our lawyer, a preliminary financial report for the authorities, and a folder labeled for Ivy, in case proof of financial abuse is needed." I wanted to say something, but I couldn't, because in the middle of a storm caused by grown-ups, it was a child who stood up and chose what was right. It was Monday morning. I had just poured a cup of coffee when I saw Nate coming down the stairs with a posture that didn't belong to a 13-year-old. His hair was neatly combed, shirt tucked into khaki pants. Not a school uniform, but the outfit he only wore when giving a presentation. "Nate, you don't have a test today, do you?" I asked, frowning slightly. He sat down, opened his laptop, and answered like I had just asked if the sky was blue. "I'm preparing a report for the IRS." I froze, the coffee nearly spilled. "You're sending what?" "A tax complaint," he said without looking up. "Mom has undeclared income from her online sales chain. I have all the wholesale invoices, transaction records from her alternate wallets, in the customer list." I sat down, still holding the cup, but no one drank. "Nate, this isn't simple. The IRS is not a place for reckless accusations." He turned to me, his eyes steadier than most grown men I had ever met. "I know. And I'm not submitting it as Nate Lane. I'm using your name." I opened my mouth to object, but then I stopped, because I knew I was no longer the only one in this house holding the reins. I also knew I no longer had the right to stop him from doing what I hadn't had the courage to start. That evening, Nate asked me to come to his room. He opened his browser and logged into a monitoring system I had never seen before. Not a regular finance app. This was an open-source platform he had customized. It scanned data from screenshots, transaction logs, even cloud folders hidden in disguised formats. "Mom has a bank account under Becky Lister," her cousin's name, at a regional bank in the South. "She uses it to receive earnings from the sales." And more importantly, Nate clicked open a new folder. "LLC Washer Records. She's the one behind a limited liability company called Truebeam Collective LLC, officially registered by Becky, but the IP address used to sign up matches our home Wi-Fi." I sat in silence. On the screen were company registration documents, email confirmations, and 6 months of financial records, all pulled from an inbox with Becky's name, but written by Karen. The phrasing, punctuation, tone, unmistakable. She used this shell company to receive transfers from investors, actually her friends, and then move the money into various personal wallets. Most of it was never reported for taxes. Nate scrolled to the bottom. "I've already sent everything to the family lawyer, Harold Maynard. Your name, your email, your digital signature. The divorce file is being prepared." I was speechless. I had never said the word divorce. Honestly, I hadn't even named exactly what Karen had done. But Nate, he hadn't hesitated. "I know this isn't an easy decision, but if you wait too long, you'll lose custody of both Ivy and me." I nodded, slowly, not because I was ready, but because there was no turning back anymore. That night, Nate carried out the final step of what he called his reaction test. He created a fake internal financial report. Using data Karen had previously sent through email, he mixed in some exaggerated figures. Estimated tax refunds flagged for audit, loans filed under relatives' names, one expense line marked minor financial fraud, under review. He sent it to Karen's business email, the one she used to talk to her collaborators. The subject line read, "Internal tax report revision. Do not share. Confidential." He didn't sign it, just attached the file, left it there. 13 minutes after the email was opened, Karen called her cousin. 18 minutes after, Becky's account started moving funds in bulk. 2 hours later, Karen came home earlier than usual, her face pale. She looked at me, then at Nate, but said nothing. "Everything all right?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Nothing. All good." Karen went straight upstairs, closed the door. That night, Nate opened his laptop again, scrolled to a folder titled Heat Map, Reaction, and logged the time, the actions, the caller's name. She's starting to cover her tracks. She thinks someone's watching. I swallowed hard. "Nate, are you scared?" He shook his head. "I'm not scared she'll find out. I'm scared you still want to forgive her." I had no answer. The next morning, I got an email from Harold, our lawyer. He had reviewed everything Nate submitted. He said just one line: "If what your son collected is true, she won't just lose custody. She'll lose everything." That Wednesday, Karen received a new email. Subject: Proposal for private event partnership. Urgent fund transfer required. Sender: Melissa Vinton. A completely fake name, but attached was a signature block with the logo of a well-known event agency in Seattle, complete with a real website, photo gallery, industry articles, all fabricated by Nate. The email content was short but tempting. "We would like to invite you to co-host a private event for VIP clients. Confidential transaction. No public media coverage. Contract value: $60,000. Please confirm your receiving account by 3 p.m. to finalize banking procedures." Karen took 6 minutes to respond. "I'm very interested in this opportunity. Below is my direct deposit information. Please keep my personal details confidential as I'm currently in negotiation with another client." Attached was the hidden bank account, the exact one Nate had been tracking for 2 months, under her cousin Becky's name, with Karen's backup email used to authorize transactions. Nate had embedded a tracker in the reply link, collecting full metadata: IP, MAC address, access times, edits, and most importantly, the full message sent from Karen's personal device, stored securely. "So she's willing to accept undeclared money even before signing a contract," Nate said without looking away from the screen. "That's enough to demonstrate tax evasion and intent to launder funds." 3 days later, I met with Harold, the lawyer, and handed him a metal clipped file, nearly 2 inches thick, spiral bound, with a hard cover. Inside were screenshots of transactions, emails, WhatsApp messages between Karen and her best friend Audrey, where she openly bragged about closing a big deal without having to share any commission. But there was another file, thinner, placed inside a red envelope. That one made me nauseous. The night before, Nate had called me into his room. He didn't say much, just opened a new folder. Coach Talks. I didn't understand until I saw the images. Karen, a man in gym uniform, both sitting inside my white SUV parked behind a fitness center. One of Karen's hands rested on his thigh. They laughed, then kissed. "The gym's exterior camera keeps footage for 3 days," Nate said, his voice emotionless. "I noticed it because the car's GPS was out of place while Mom claimed to be studying with Audrey." I looked at my son, speechless. He remained calm. "I saved this for last because I knew if it was just about money, you might still forgive her. But if you saw this, you'd understand why I couldn't. I wasn't sure what hurt more, Karen's actions, or the fact that my son had been preparing for this moment of shattering truth all along." That night, I called Karen into the living room. Ivy and Nate were already there, sitting at opposite ends of the couch, separated by silence. Karen walked in, exhausted. She had just returned from her weekend yoga class. I didn't circle around. I placed the folder on the glass table, gently, like a letter. But when Karen opened it, those papers were heavier than stone. Proof of transfers, the bait email, text messages, resort receipts, the fake company registration, and at the end, 3 photos. Karen and the coach, side profile, clear faces, light from the street lamp filtering through the windshield. She stared at them, head held up for a few seconds. Then her gaze dropped. "Why?" she mumbled. "How did you get all of this?" Nate stood up, opened his laptop, connected to the projector. A timeline appeared on the wall. Each transaction, each email, each money transfer, marked in color. A small panel showed the trap email response time. Everything matched perfectly. Not a single error. Nate didn't yell, didn't cry. How? He just looked at his mother. I'm sorry, Mom, but you've made this house unsafe. Karen turned to me, her eyes filled with confusion, fury, and panic. You taught him to spy on me. I shook my head. I didn't teach him to betray. You did that first, Karen shouted. I'm their mother. I was just trying to have a life of my own. And you used our kids' college fund to live that life, I said, voice low but sharp. What are you teaching them? That betrayal is a form of freedom. Karen turned to Ivy. The girl had been crying. She said nothing, just stood up and walked upstairs, her steps heavy like stone. The room now held only me, Karen, and Nate. Karen sat down, nothing left to defend. No apology, no excuse. Tomorrow, the divorce papers will be delivered to your office, I said. Karen didn't react, just buried her head in her hands. That was the first time she didn't fight back. Nate turned off the projector, closed the laptop, looked at me. Do you believe me now? I nodded. And in that moment, I realized I had lost a wife, but I had witnessed my son become the strongest man in this house. Karen left the house the following Monday morning. She didn't say a word. She didn't take much with her either, just a small, rolling suitcase and a handbag. Nothing that resembled the woman who had once run this household for 18 years. I stood at the doorway, not escorting her, not stopping her. Nate only bowed slightly to his mother. Ivy stayed in her room. 3 days later, the bank sent a formal notice to both me and Harold Maynard, our attorney. Every account under the name Karen Lane had been temporarily frozen for civil investigation. That same day, a lawsuit was filed for unlawful appropriation of shared assets. I had never imagined I would see my wife's name printed that way on official documents. Defendant, Karen Ann Lane, accused of transferring marital property without legal consent. Karen used to have a tight circle of friends, women who sipped wine and chatted about art, travel, and Japanese-style kitchen remodels. But once Nate anonymously released the evidence to a local forum called Parents Legal Wall, everything went silent, like fire extinguished by ice water. No one defended her, not a single message of concern. The Instagram accounts that once tagged her began unfollowing in unison. I knew it was Nate who had posted it. He never said so aloud, but the way the post was sourced, how the timestamps were presented, the subtle balance of privacy and revelation. It all bore his signature. The title was simple. If you're a child who knows your parents are committing financial fraud, you have the right to speak up. 2 weeks after Karen left, we had a preliminary custody hearing. Karen arrived 11 minutes late. Wrinkled blouse, hair hastily tied. No attorney, just herself. Ivy refused to attend. Nate wore a white shirt and glasses I'd never seen him wear before, probably to hide the exhaustion from sleepless nights. Harold went straight to the point, no emotions, no narrative. Just documents, transfer logs, tax evasion receipts, her reply to the $60,000 email trap, and confirmation from the IRS that a review had been initiated for unreported income. Plus the evidence of her affair. The judge didn't need long to reach a decision. Karen was temporarily stripped of custody rights for both Ivy and Nate, pending the financial investigation. In addition, she was ordered to repay every dollar she had withdrawn from Ivy's college fund and submit a full income disclosure within 15 days. Karen lowered her head, not a single word. After the hearing, she tried to approach Nate, but he took one step back and said, loud enough for both of us to hear, I don't want you in prison. I just want you to understand. If you no longer respect the truth, you lose your rights to it. That sentence hit me in the chest, not because it was harsh, but because it was true. Karen turned away. This time her eyes were no longer lifted, and I didn't look back. I didn't look. We didn't mention her name once at the dinner table for the next month. Ivy returned to school, pouring herself into her scholarship essays. And Nate, he started writing a new guide. Children's Guide to Financial Safety, When Your Parent Crosses the Line. I read the first draft, didn't change a word. The way he wrote was not only clear, but so mature it sent a chill down my spine. One quiet evening in early June, I sat with Nate on the back porch. The sky was overcast, the scent of rain still lingering on the cement. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and poured him some warm ginger tea. Nate, yes, Dad, you know I had planned to forgive your mother before I saw what you showed me. He nodded. looking straight into my eyes. I had planned to forgive her too, but then I saw that video, her with the trainer, and I realized she didn't just take money, she chose to do that when no one forced her. And that was a choice. I said nothing. There was nothing to defend. Forgiveness is a gift, Nate continued, but some people aren't honest enough to deserve that gift. A week later, I received an email from Harold. Karen had agreed to repay the full amount over 18 months in installments and had signed a waiver relinquishing any involvement in Ivy's education plan. I printed the email and placed it on the dining table. Ivy picked it up first. She read it, nodded, didn't cry, didn't speak, just looked at Nate. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to thank me," Nate replied. "This is what grown-ups should have done from the start." I don't know where Karen lives now. I've heard she's staying with a friend looking for work, sold most of her jewelry from the so-called freedom phase. But I don't check. I don't need to. The only thing I still pay attention to is the peace slowly returning to this house. No more shouting, no more secrets. And strangely, amid the rubble of a broken marriage, I finally feel like I'm being a father, for real. Summer came later than usual. Rain lingered stubbornly through April, and then sunshine poured over the city one early morning in June, as if it needed no permission. I remember that morning well. Nate had just gotten a new haircut. Ivy came home holding the approval letter for her scholarship from the state program. The house felt strangely quiet. No more footsteps of Karen passing through the hallway. No more Chanel perfume faintly mixed with detergent. No more hushed phone calls behind closed doors. Just me and the two children, though I no longer dared to call them children, and a house that had learned how to breathe slower after the storm. Ivy got into Brown, a partial full scholarship, the rest covered by an organization for child protection that had seen Nate's anonymous post. She didn't say thank you many times. She just hugged me for a long while the evening the acceptance letter arrived, as if all those old grudges she had once held against her father had slowly begun to loosen. And Nate, my son, started a YouTube channel. Not a gaming channel, not a travel vlog like his classmates. His channel was called Protecting What Grows. It shared how kids could protect their personal finances, detect fraud within families, and most importantly, how to avoid growing up too fast because of adult mistakes. I once asked him, "Do you ever wish you weren't the kid who knew everything?" He answered, "Yes, but if I didn't do it, who would protect Ivy?" I quit my job 3 months after Karen left, not because I didn't need the money, but because I needed the time. I submitted a request to withdraw part of my retirement fund and bought back a small plot of land by Horseshoe Lake, the place I once dreamed of building a cabin for my old age. That fall, we began fixing up the small house on the land. Every weekend, we drove 2 hours to get there. Ivy painted the walls. Nate built shelves. I spent hours picking up nails, listening to the wood creak underfoot, and realizing sometimes what we need isn't a brand new beginning, but a place with no more lies. One Sunday afternoon, I opened an old cabinet in the garage and found the box that held our wedding photos. I sat on the floor, picking up each one, flipping them over. On the back of one photo, Karen had written, "If one day I forget how much we once loved each other, please show me this." I burned the whole stack that same afternoon, not out of hate, but because I knew I had already shown her that photo, and she had chosen not to take it back. One day in October, as the trees in the yard turned golden, Nate handed me a document, a guide for fathers recovering from financial betrayal. I flipped through every page. These were the lessons my son had drawn from the collapse of our marriage. One section was dedicated to family financial control. Another talked about why kids need to understand their own legal rights. And one final section bore the title, "What I Want to Say to the Man Who Apologized Even When He Wasn't Wrong." I read to that point, and my eyes blurred. Not from pain, but because in all that had broken, we still found something that had never been lost. Love, even if quiet. The night Ivy packed her things to leave for Brown, she sat next to me in the living room. The only sounds were the creaking of the wooden chair and the wind slipping through the door. "You know," Ivy said, "I don't hate Mom the way I used to." I looked up at her. Her face looked more grown, calmer. strangely like Karen, but no longer the Karen I once knew. Holding on to anger is exhausting, she said. But I know. Mom made her choice, and now I've made mine. I choose forgiveness, but I won't forget. I nodded. Then I asked softly, are you afraid, stepping into the world with all that's happened? Ivy smiled, gently, like an adult. I'm not afraid because I have Nate, and because now I know there are things more important than money, like trust, and knowing no one gets to steal it from me again. The last night before Ivy left, Nate came to my room, knocked, and sat at the edge of the bed. Dad, he said, I think it's time you do something for yourself. I raised my brow. Like what? He smiled, then pulled a plan from his backpack. Dad's project, rebuild and restore. It was a plan to turn the lakeside cabin into a retreat for men who had been betrayed, financially, emotionally, or both. A place for healing, to relearn trust, and to teach their children how to stand again. I'll help you with marketing, building the website, raising funds from the community. He spoke like it was just another weekend task. I looked at my son, the 13-year-old who once shattered a web of lies with one truth, and nodded. We'll rebuild, but this time for the ones who deserve it. Karen once believed that by taking the money she could take control, but what she lost wasn't just a number. It was trust. It was respect. It was the chance to remain among those who were willing to forgive. If only she had been honest. As for us, me, Ivy, and Nate, we did not let her betrayal destroy us. We learned to stand again, not with revenge, but with clarity. If you've ever gone through something like this, remember, you don't have to scream to claim justice. Sometimes silence, patience, and hard evidence are the strongest voice of all. What do you think about this journey? If you've gone through something similar, leave a comment. Your story could be the light for someone still stuck in the dark. And if you believe that the truth, no matter how late, will always be power, share this story.